It's 4 o'clock, so appreciate everybody getting on the webinar with us today. Kevin and I are going to talk about the top 10 retirement mistakes to avoid. And if anyone would like this PowerPoint when we're done, please email us. We're happy to send that to you, and feel free to ask us for the recording as well if you or anyone you know might be interested in watching it later. Just to let everybody know, for our next presentation on July 23rd at 4 p.m., we're going to be having a discussion on travel adventures for retirees, exploring unique destinations and travel tips. So if that is of interest, love to have you join us on July 23rd at 4 p.m. And we'll send out more information as we get closer to that date. And if our pictures are in the way of the PowerPoint, just know that you can move things around in Zoom on your screen if that would make viewing easier. And this call is being recorded, and we'll put this up on our website here when we are done. So without further ado, let's get started here. Give me 1 second. Kevin, you're still seeing the PowerPoint, right?
Yep, everything looks great.
Great, okay. So here's just some disclosure slides. And from an agenda standpoint today, we want to cover these main points: failing to plan, not taking into account taxes, letting the market spook you, taking too much or too little risk, failing to adopt an income plan, not considering inflation, not accounting for healthcare costs, leaving out insurance, taking Social Security early or too early, and neglecting estate planning. So certainly this isn't the all-inclusive list to retirement, but these are extremely important topics to consider as you are close to or in retirement. And we all hope you find this information helpful as we review it. So if we think about things from a income plan standpoint or retirement planning standpoint, kind of put all of these different types of accounts in a puzzle. And everybody spends their accumulation years growing each of these different pieces of the puzzle, whether that be retirement accounts through work, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, some people have pensions through work. Outside of work, you can invest in individual retirement accounts, pre-tax or raw. We all have Social Security from a standpoint of money that we're paying in during our accumulation years, so we have that Social Security benefit later on. Part-time work in retirement is an option for some. You got life insurance, annuities, personal savings, but all of that should be based on what is your picture of retirement. So if we think about that puzzle, if we think about the picture on the box, if you will, that's the main thing that we want all of these pieces of the puzzle working towards. And we want to fit all of these pieces together in a strategic way that, number one, make sure you don't run out of money. Number two, that make sure it's tax efficient, that you're not paying too much tax later in retirement with forced distributions, or early in retirement based on different deductions, things that you have. But everybody has a different puzzle because everyone's retirement goals are different. So we're going to talk about these different types of considerations in retirement. And as you look at a picture, how we try and put together this puzzle in a viewing format, some of you on this call are probably familiar with this type of reporting, but we have different income sources that hit at different times. So if we're looking at the far left-hand side of the screen, the income flows, everybody's different in what income flows they have. During the working years, they've got their salary. That's an income flow that will eventually stop in retirement. And once that has ended, Then you start new income flows potentially, like part-time work, or Social Security can start as early as 62 or late as 70. We'll talk more about that. Some people might have pensions, others might not, but that would be an income flow. And then you can create different guaranteed income streams with products like annuities that are out there in the marketplace. But different income flows hit at different times. And looking at those income flows for each individual, each one of our clients, we want to get a picture of when those different income streams are going to start or stop, because that affects everything else. It affects things from a taxation standpoint, affects things from a required minimum distribution standpoint. But that income flow line is really important to get a base knowledge of how those income streams start and stop. And then we look at any type of required minimum distributions that you might have from in retirement plans, whether they be at work or IRA accounts. And we want to get an understanding of what type of required minimum distributions might be forced out later. And later is based on required minimum distribution rules. For some on this call, those required distribution rules will start at 73. For others, it would start at 75. When I started in this industry 24 years ago, required minimum distribution started at age 70 and a half. So that's constantly changing. Taxes and rules are constantly changing, but we want to make sure we're always updating a model of retirement based on all those new rules and how they are reflected for an individual's plan. But all of this really is based on what people are spending, right? In the end, it comes down to how much money you need to live comfortably in retirement. And then we want to factor in things like longevity. Retirement can last a very long time. Things like inflation. Things are going to get more expensive over time. That's really our job, to help you manage this picture, to help you manage what could be a 30 or 40-year time frame in retirement, and then constantly go back and update things, because all of this that you're seeing on this hypothetical screen right now are projections. We don't know what the rate of return of investments are going to be. We don't know how long people are going to live. We don't know what inflation is going to be. We don't know if there'll be any healthcare events. But we want to have a picture. We want to have a base plan to go back to, that we can model different risks, that we can look at how a retirement might flow, because that helps us to help our clients plan their investments, plan their tax plan, their estate plan. Just in general, the retirement planning side of things is a lot easier to do when you have a picture on the box, when you have a picture of what that might look like before you dive into it. But this type of picture is something that we can help individuals look at. So if you're not familiar with that and it would be helpful, please let us know, as we're happy to help put together some projections for a retirement income plan. We talked about one of those risks being longevity. Nobody knows how long they're going to live, but this is just some general statistics for today's life expectancy probabilities. And if you look at on the left here in purple, is basically women, and the chart here is showing for a 65-year-old what percentage of individuals that are age 65 will live to each of these age ranges: 85, 90, 95, or 100. So for our total population average, specifically here in purple for women, 52% of 65-year-olds will make it to at least age 85. For non-smokers in good health, that 52% jumps up to 72%. So 7 out of 10 women age 65 will make it age 85, non-smokers in good health at 65. Age 90, you got 30% of our total population, but 54% for non-smokers in good health. So 1 out of every 2 people, 2 women, will make it to age 90. That's a 25-year period of time. So again, you start thinking of longevity, you got to have money to make that last long. Age 95 here, you've got 11% for our total population average, or 31% for non-smokers. And for age 100, it's less here, but these numbers keep going up. And that's where we're constantly talking about making sure longevity is something that our clients are thinking about. For men, on the other hand, it's a little bit lower statistical probability from a longevity standpoint, but still for non-smokers, 63% of men make it to 85, 43% to age 90, 22% to 95, 8% to age 100. And then for a couple, there's a 90% chance that non-smokers, one of you will make it to age 85, 73% chance that one of you at least will make it to age 90, 46% chance, or 1 out of 2 here, that one of you will make it to age 95, and 20% chance that one of you will make it to at least age 100. And then both members here are this last column. But again, that's just one of those things that nobody knows that their longevity, but we would rather plan for a long retirement because that's the risk, right? If you die early, you're not going to run out of money because you're gone. But we got to think about longevity. I like to tell this story about my grandmother, where everybody in her family passed away before the age of 80. And she wondered if God forgot about her when she was 103. It's just, you don't know. And we got to think about longevity as a risk because we want to make sure people aren't running out of money. Looking at this, what we call this retirement equation, we know that we are in control of some things and we are out of control of others. What are we out of control of? Market returns. Nobody controls that. Nobody can make the market do one thing or the other. I mean, we always want to see it go up, but that's something that's completely out of our control, just like tax and benefits policy, that we don't control the political environment. We want to adjust to it, but we have no control of it. What do we have total control of? That's in this purple, our saving and our spending. We always control those two things, and we control our asset allocation allocation. What investments do we use, and what types of accounts do we put them in? So we want to help our clients make decisions about those purple circles along what's happening in those blue circles that we don't control. What do we have some control of? Well, what we do in retirement, employment earnings. Do we have any part-time work, and how long do we do that? And to an extent, we have some control in longevity depending on how the way we live, what we eat, what are our hobbies, do we stay active? So all of that is centered around your retirement, of which some things are out of control, some things total control, some we have some control, but it's all coming down to a full plan that every one of those boxes affects people's retirement. So I'm going to turn it over here to Kevin to talk about the next step on our agenda.
All right. Number 2, retirement mistakes, not taking into account taxes. This is a big one. All right. So if we take a look at the historical tax rates, looking at the top chart, it shows that the top marginal federal income tax rate from back in 1925 to 2026, that's what it shows. And again, as a reminder, a marginal tax rate is the tax rate at which your last dollar of income earned is taxed at. As you can see on here, from the mid-1930s through the early 1960s, the top marginal federal tax rates were 79% or higher, topping out at a whopping 92% in the early 1950s. Wow, that's high. Also, the chart highlights in teal the duration of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That was passed at the end of 2017, and that took effect in 2018. So certain provisions, including individual tax rates of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, will sunset at the beginning of 2026, when the U.S. tax code will revert to the higher pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act tax levels, again, barring any changes or action from Congress. Also, it's important to note that the current top marginal tax rate of 37% plus 3.8%, if you combine that with the Medicare surcharge tax, is certainly well below the long-term federal marginal tax average rate of 57.5%. And along with the marginal federal tax rate, we also need to consider the average or effective tax rate to really help tell more of the story. So as you can see in the bottom chart, the effective or average tax rate paid after accounting for deductions, exemptions, and so forth, now since the late 1970s for high income earners is just under 22%. So really the takeaway here is that while the top marginal federal bracket has really fluctuated tremendously over the years, the actual effective or average tax rate paid by high income earners over the last 40 years has really stayed pretty consistent. But even so, something we continue to constantly monitor. Now this slide does a good job of showing general tax considerations. A couple items worth noting is, for one, we have the long-term capital gains and qualified dividend tax rate, and that ranges from 0% to 20%, and that's dependent on your income. Also, under current tax law, there's a cap of $10,000 on the state and local deduction, also called SALT, the acronym, along with a limit on the amount of home mortgage debt that you can deduct interest from of $750,000. That's $750,000, in total mortgage there you can potentially deduct up to. And then in addition, for those that are ultra high net worth, the top federal estate tax rate is 40%, and now that's on estates over 13.61 million per person, or over 27.22 million per couple. And then along with that, the annual gift tax exclusion amount is $18,000 per donor. So as we work with our clients in conjunction with your tax advisors, we spend time reviewing how the above tax rates impact our clients' financial pictures. Another tax that most retirees don't think about much is their Medicare premiums. Now, both original Medicare and Medicare Advantage Part B and D premiums will be higher for those with modified adjusted gross incomes over $103,000 if you're filing single, or above $206,000 if you're filing jointly, and that would be based on 2022 income. So to that end, it's important to remember that your Medicare premiums are always based on your income from 2 years prior. So your Medicare premiums this year are based on your modified adjusted gross income back from 2022. So with this in mind, in conjunction with your tax advisor, we can help you review how your IRA distributions, for instance, may affect your future Medicare premiums, understanding that even if your modified adjusted gross income is only $1 above the threshold, you would be required to pay the higher Medicare premiums, which certainly can add up pretty quick. Lastly, if you stop working or your income has been lowered, you may be eligible for an appeal to try and reduce your Medicare premiums, which is a fun fact. We've included a retirement plan contribution guide for 2023 and 24, shown above, and it also includes Social Security limits and maximum benefits. So although a number of contribution limits have increased for this year, we wanted to specifically mention that maximum contributions into 401ks, 403bs, 457 plans for investors under 50, it went up from $22,500 last year to $23,000, while the age 50 plus catch-up amount has stayed the same year over year, and that would provide for a max combined contribution limit of $30,500, again, if you're 50 by year end or above. Now this slide does really a great job of showing you the pros and cons of various retirement account types, as different tax advantage savings accounts have different tax characteristics. As is marked with the plus sign in the middle column, investment growth and tax advantage accounts are usually tax deferred or tax free. For retirement accounts showing pre and post tax or Roth in the top two rows, money may go in or come out tax free depending on the retirement account type, and if the deposits and withdrawals are qualified. So on the last row, it shows health savings accounts, which really must be paired with a qualified high deductible health plan. So HSAs offer triple tax benefits if the funds are used for qualified health care expenses, as the funds are contributed tax-free and the investment growth and withdrawals are tax-free. Now with the triple tax benefits in mind, leaving money in HSAs should grow tax-free and be taken out tax-free for qualified healthcare expenses in retirement can really help optimize the preferential tax treatment of HSAs. So lastly, with non-deductible or after-tax contributions being less advantageous or advantage, funding these accounts should only be considered really after you exhaust other opportunities to save in other tax advantage accounts. And all of these accounts are designed for long-term savings. So generally, there are penalties on early or non-qualified withdrawals that are certainly worth keeping in mind. So one strategy that can certainly be effective in controlling taxes in retirement is a Roth IRA. Really, in fact, since 2010, all investors, regardless of their income levels, are eligible to convert traditional IRAs assets to a Roth IRA. So really the trade-off here is paying taxes today when the conversion is completed with the benefit of tax-free qualified withdrawals in retirement. So unlike most traditional pre-tax retirement accounts, there are no mandatory withdrawals. So Roth IRA owners can choose to leave assets within their account to grow tax-free. Also, having a portion of your retirement savings in a Roth in retirement really provides you with more choice on where to draw income from given a particular tax situation. So for example, if an investor is in a higher tax bracket in retirement and needs additional income, drawing funds tax-free from the Roth may make sense. So conversely though, those in a low tax bracket in retirement may choose to draw funds from a traditional IRA instead. Because in this case, even though taxes will be due, the individual is taking advantage of lower marginal tax rates while leaving more funds within the Roth IRA to grow tax-free. Now everyone's tax and financial situation are different. So really before moving ahead on a Roth conversion, please run your thoughts by John or myself, which also likely will include, getting a tax advisor's input. All right, back to you, John.
Well, thank you. We're going to move on here to letting the market spook you. This is just something from a emotional standpoint. It's harder to do in retirement versus your accumulation years because you're in withdrawal mode. And you concentrate, you watch the account balances a little bit more. So drops certainly can affect you more than gains can make you feel good. But just some information about general market statistics. If we look at and step back and go to January 1st of 2004 and look at a 20-year period of time through the start of this year, if you had just invested $10,000 in the S&P 500, which is the 500 largest US stocks, it's the index you see on the news every night, and didn't do anything with it over that period of time, that 20 years, your 10,000 would have grown to about $63,000, which equates to a 9.7% per year average rate of return. Now here's where it kind of gets interesting. If you missed the 10 best days out of that entire 20-year period, 10 market days, your 10,000 would have only grown to 29,154, or a 5.5% per year rate of return. So almost half of the rate of return over that 20-year period was because of 10 days. If we look at missing the 20 best days, your 10,000 would only grow to 17,000, or a 2.8% per year rate of return. If you miss the 40 best days, you now have lost money. You have a negative 1% per year rate of return. So over that 20-year period of time, 40 days created the entire rate of return. And that's what's hard to do from a market timing perspective. You never know when these really good days are going to come, when they're going to hit the market. In that box here in the middle, it basically shows you some stats. 7 of the 10 best days occurred within 2 weeks of the 10 worst days. So 70% of the best days happen within 2 weeks of when everybody wants to get out. Because you don't want to get out in the good times. People panic when the market goes down in those really bad days, the worst days. And since you panic after the worst happened, then you don't necessarily benefit from the market rebound. If we look at 6 of the 7 best days, that occurred directly after the worst day itself. And case in point, the second worst day of 2020 was on March 12th. I was immediately followed by the second best day of the year on March 13th. So it's hard to kind of fathom these numbers and look at 40 days creating the entire rate of return over a 20-year period of time. But in general, I think the key there is you don't want to miss the good days, and the good days tend to happen right after the bad days. So the key is kind of staying invested through full market cycle. Looking at just general calendar years, I kind of showed you on that slide before, the average rate of return was around 9% per year. Very rarely does the market earn 9% in a calendar year. If we look at that blue section on the right, the second box here, this is when the market averaged between 7 and 14% for the calendar year, which is kind of close to that 9%. So in 2016, the calendar year, S&P made 11.9, 2014 it made 13, 2004 it made 10. But the thing that we wanted to have you pay attention here is if we look at all of this blue column, which everybody's having fun when the market's in the blue column, because that means the calendar year is up. 7 out of every 10 calendar years, the market is up, the market is positive. The average positive return is over 21%. So even though the average return drops down to around 9 to 10 when we count all calendar years, when the market's good, it tends to be really good. And case in point here, if you look at the farthest right, these are all the calendar years where the market went up over 28%. So on the top, you got 2021, 2019, 2013, 2003, 1998, and so on and so on. So majority of the up years, the market goes over 28%. Obviously, that's the most calendar years out of this graph here. Now, subsequently, when we have bad times, that's over here in this orange section. The average bad year is around minus 13%. The market went down more than 28% in 08, 1937, 1931. It went down 21 to 28%, 02, 1974, 1930. So there's a lot less orange years than there is blue, which is a good thing for everybody. But overall, we just want to look at those averages and say very rarely does the average actually happen. When the market's good, it tends to be really good. And when the market's bad, the most likely scenario is it's down 7 to 14%, as you can see here by this graph. Take it away, Kevin.
All right. So number 4, taking too much risk or too little risk. So if you've been investing for any amount of time, you certainly have heard of the word diversification. So by diversifying your investments, you are really carefully allocating your holdings across multiple asset classes. So again, diversifying in itself does not keep your investments from going down. It helps maximize your return at a specific given level of risk. So as you can see on the two charts, and the pie charts, it shows two approaches. The one on the left is a less diversified strategy, and that strategy invests in 3 asset classes. And the one on the right, it shows a more diversified strategy that invests in 8 asset classes. And from 2001 to 2020, each strategy has experienced really the same level of risk, and we measure that by standard deviation in this case, or volatility, but the more diversified strategy experienced a higher return. The slide shows here how a $1 million portfolio weathers a 4, 5, and 6% withdrawal rate over 35 years, while being invested in a 40-60 stock bond portfolio. As you can see, the 4% withdrawal rate, with that, the retiree has a very low likelihood of ever running out of money over 35 years. When we look at the bar graph on the right, it shows that although it is very unlikely for the retiree to run out of money at a 4% withdrawal rate, there's almost a 1 in 4 chance that after 35 years, the retiree could end up with over 5 times the amount they started with. So what this really tells us is that there is more to retirement income planning than just the simple 4% withdrawal rule. Because if you end up with $5 million plus in this example, which it shows, and you have no desire to leave a legacy, for instance, that would mean you could have made needless lifestyle sacrifices over those 35 years. So instead, we can help you work through your retirement income planning options and making the conversation more dynamic and also making sure it's fitting to your situation. So one strategy to approach retirement planning is using what's called a goals-based approach. With this approach, rather than having all your investments in one account, you instead have separate accounts for different financial goals based on time horizon and savings needs, and really helping to give you more clarity and control of your finances. So as part of this, you want to make sure you have a 3 to 6 month emergency reserve that is invested in a sort of cash type account. That could be checking accounts, savings accounts, accounts like that, with your mid and long-term accounts being invested in more growth-oriented investment allocations. If we look back from 1950 until 2023, at the bar chart at the bottom of the page, we see that during any rolling 20-year time period, that average returns on stocks, bonds, a 50-50 stock bond mix, and cash are all positive. As we've said 100 times in the past performance doesn't guarantee future results, but what this may indicate is that if we have a long-term time horizon, it is likely that we will be rewarded for holding stocks.
Okay, so let's talk now about failing to adopt an income plan. So when we think about retirement, some of you on this call has heard me say the first part of retirement are the go-go years, then you move into the slow-go years, and then you move into the no-go years. So spending is different over that period of a full retirement. And this graphs that out in regards to the average annual household spending by age. So if you look at these colors, they're based on a different form of spending, whether it be on travel, entertainment, transportation, food and beverage. You can see those color coded here. But looking at the average 60 to 64-year-old spending a total of $74,670 on those different items, over time, that tends to go down. You can see age 65 to 69, not counting inflation, mind you, but the 74,000 goes down to 68. And then you hit age 70 and that goes to 64,000, down to 58 to 53, and so on. So if we think about that kind of that gradual scale, really the only items that tend to go up as you get older are healthcare expenses. That's this green column on the bottom, as well as charitable contributions tend to go up as one gets older as well. Every other column on average goes down. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will for you, but it paints the picture from a perspective of when we talk about inflation, retiree inflation is different than the inflation you see on the news, because spending does change as people age. You can see travel there all the way on top. As you get older, that line certainly diminishes, which makes sense because when you're in your late 80s and 90s, your desire to travel great distances is really not there. Here we talk about the sequence of return, and we're going to look in this slide at 100,000 lump sum investment. So that's starting here at line 0. And then on the bottom, you've got different rate of returns, right? I mean, any given calendar year, the market's going to be up, the market's going to be down, and they're going to be different over a 30-year period of time. So this blue column represents a good start. The market that is positive, anything above this 0% line means it was a good year. And then the blue also represents a bad ending, like not as high of rate of returns. In fact, there's some drops there at the end. In the middle we're just going to show a line where it's just the exact same. And we know that that doesn't come true because the investments do not get the exact same rate of return every year. But I want to just show you this graph to show you kind of what the numbers mean. And then the bottom here is a bad start and a good ending. So it's basically just the exact flip-flop of this blue scenario. But every single one of these scenarios represents an average return of 5%. Through the good and the bad and the good, and the steady, all of them average 5%. So if you invest $100,000 lump sum, regardless of whether you had a great start and a bad end, a steady average, or a bad start and a great end, you will come up with the exact same dollar value in 30 years. And you can see that represented by these lines here. You can see the great start and the bad end in blue. You can see the steady average here in gray. And you can see the bad start and the good ending in green. They all end up in the same place at the end in the accumulation. Now, it's really not realistic, right? Because people don't start out in their accumulation years when you're 20 years old and have $100,000 lump sum and then you never save. So this is an example. Rather than starting out with a big lump sum, 100,000, you start with 0 and you save $10,000 a year. This is where it gets interesting, where right before the end of the 30-year period and right when withdrawals start make an enormous difference in terms of the balances that you will have at the end. So in the first few years, it really doesn't matter whether it's a good start, a bad start, or a steady average. You really can't decipher between these lines. And that really goes all the way through the first 15 years. There's hardly any difference what type of rate of return you have. As we look towards the last 5 years, this is when change really starts to occur. So if you invested $10,000 a year for 25 years, and then we had in that one column the bad start but the great ending, that's here in green. Your $10,000 a year would have grown to $948,000. That 5% exact average here in gray would have grown to $664,000. And in blue, which was the great start, bad ending, the 10,000 a year would have grown to 485,000. Almost half of the good. Now remember, each of these is a 5% average rate of return, every single one of the lines. But based on when you got those returns, had an enormous effect on your beginning retirement value. So it just stands to reason, as you get closer to withdrawing, you want to be really careful on your asset allocation, on your risk level, because you have the most to lose during this time frame leading up to retirement. On the flip side, if we look at the bottom of the graph, now that you are retired and you start withdrawing, again, it makes a huge difference on how long your money will last, depending on how the market does in the first few years of your retirement. So again, looking at that same 5% average, but if we have a bad start to your retirement and you're withdrawing during that time, you can see that you ran out of money in about year 24. If we have a great start but a bad end, that was that blue line, your $1 million ends up with 1.7 million, so plenty of excess. And if you have the exact same 5% average forever, which again is not realistic, but you have 807,000. So I just want to paint the picture that those last few years before retirement and those first few years in retirement, when your money is the greatest, really makes a big difference in what type of excess you're going to have over that 30-year period of time from a balance perspective. And let's put it in real terms. So if we look at an actual time frame, so specifically here, 1966 to the year 2000, if we look at a 40-60 portfolio, so 40% invested in the S&P 500 and 60% invested in bonds, the actual annual return for that 40-60 portfolio over that period of time averaged 9.5% per year. Okay, so that is these green dials right here basically represents, was it an up year, was it a down year, but that average was 9.5%. And if we look at just a benchmark here, in this gray line is just an 8.1% average, where the exact same rate of return every single year, rather than ups and downs. So 8.1 versus 9.5, you'd rather have the 9.5, right? It's a higher number. But if we look in reality, if you are taking out withdrawals, and this assumes about a 4% withdrawal rate starting when you're age 65 in 1966 in this example, that green column here, the actual performance from 1966 to 2000, you would have ran out of money when you're about age 88. If we assume a constant rate of return that was actually 1.5% lower, it took you all the way out to age 100. So again, just looking at that time frame, 1966 to 1970, you had kind of a bad start and a good ending. This bad start really hurt this green line here right at the beginning, because the balances were the biggest they would ever be. So again, just painting the picture that the last 5 years before retirement, first 5 years in retirement are really important to overall how your balance is affected over a 30-year retirement period of time. Now, how do we fix that? Well, this last graph just assumes a 4% withdrawal rate increasing with inflation every year. If you were to, instead of just taking a blind inflation increase every single year, if you were to say during a bad year, you didn't give yourself any raise, but during a good year, instead of a inflation raise, maybe you gave yourself inflation +1, then your portfolio would have been able to last until your age 100. So ultimately, changing the dials a little bit and not just doing your withdrawal patterns blindly in retirement is important if we have a really bad start. So it doesn't mean your retirement will blow up completely. You just have to make slight adjustments over time, because obviously the goal for everyone on this call is to not run out of money. And thinking of that longevity, we want to make sure that your plan is always healthy, regardless of whether the market's good or bad during the beginning of retirement.
All right, the next one, number 6, not considering inflation. So as we've seen firsthand over the last couple of years, inflation is certainly worth paying attention to. And a few examples are given above to put this into perspective, including really what I would say the most glaring example would be the price of a single family home. It increased from around $44,000 back in 1976 to over $433,000 today. So for both younger and older Americans, housing is really easily the largest single expense. From 2017 to 2022, housing costs were coming in at over 40% of an American's budget. So not only is housing the single largest expense, the cost of housing had been holding steady at 3% for a few years, but then last year it jumped up by 4.8%. Also, even though the second largest expense for Americans over the age of 75 is healthcare, which again may not come as no surprise, the silver lining is that the cost of healthcare had been increasing at 4.5% for a few years, but then last year the cost increased by a mere 0.4%. Oh, you're muted, John.
Thank you, Kevin. Sorry about that. Looking at the next one, not accounting for healthcare costs. This shows healthcare costs for retirees before age 65. Because if you retire before age 65, pre-Medicare, have to have your own health insurance. So this goes out and looks at the marketplace for a non-smoker age 64 years old. And obviously you have different levels of plans. You can do the Cadillac plan, you could do a lesser plan, and this is comparing a silver plan where the insurance covers about 70% of costs for the enrollees versus a bronze plan where the insurance covers about 60% of costs for enrollees. So looking at that silver plan, the premium, the nationwide average premium is about $1,057 per individual. If you look at the dark green, this 317, that's just estimated out-of-pocket cost for the nationwide average on top of that $1,000 premium. So total there is about $1,300 from a standpoint of the total cost of a silver plan nationwide average. If we look at on the high side, $1,326 per premium, low side 617. So obviously you have different levels that you can choose. Going to the bronze, the nationwide average premium is about $771 a person, adding about $308 for estimated out-of-pocket costs for a total of $1,000. One resource we wanted to provide is this website here. If you want to take a screenshot or a picture of it, this www.kff.org. It is basically a subsidy calculator that can help you look at different costs based on tax credits that would be potentially provided for you if you put in your income and things like that. So it gives a resource to look specifically at situations that you might want to consider. But just to get an idea of the healthcare costs, we have to assume that in retirement because it's not a cost people are used to in their accumulation years. It's typically the employer's paying for it. And pre-Medicare, you've got the cost on your own before age 65, and then post-Medicare, post-age 65, you still have supplemental costs that you would have to worry about as well. And that's kind of represented here when we look at Medicare and the different types of costs that Medicare costs in 2024 dollars. Over here, you can see these different colors. Purple represents Part B, green represents Part D costs, blue is other out-of-pocket costs, and this lighter green is the Medigap type policy. But all total for a 65-year-old this year, the cost is about $542 per person. Looking at what that will be projected to be at age 95, you can see it's almost 3 times that cost, about $1,484. So that goes back to that previous slide I was showing about retirement costs. This is one area of retirement that tends to go up over time is healthcare/medical, simply for partly this reason that you're looking at on this screen here.
All right, number 8, leaving out insurance. All right, so making sure you appropriately plan for the scenario where you need care, and this would include in-home care, assisted living, and nursing home, is really critical. As you can see, if paid care is needed, over 1/3 of care needed recipients need care for over 5 years. If needing care for an extended period of time plays out, it really could implode the best laid financial plan. So luckily, there are some financial solutions that John and I would be happy to help you consider to really help you protect against this risk and minimize the potential outlay in that event. So now this slide does a good job of showing how much hourly home health aides cost. As you can see, Wisconsin comes in between $24 to $26 an hour, probably on the higher end in more rural areas. But for those of you who only need help a few hours a week, possibly supplemented by friends and family, the cost can definitely in that case be manageable. But if you have significant needs and are wanting to stay in your home to be cared for around the clock, costs can definitely skyrocket. Also, just to give you a better sense as to the cost of a private nursing home here in Madison, it comes in at just over $125,000 per year. So for options for long-term care include a few different things: informal care from friends and or family. We have things like a traditional long-term care policy. We have a hybrid life with long-term care rider policy. And then there's also a hybrid annuity with long-term care rider policy. So as we help our clients with the risk management side of our comprehensive financial planning, we're always being sure to explore the pros and cons of each option, with our clients. When we help our clients plan for care, we discuss multiple care funding options that may be used in connection with each other, including things like savings, income, family care, private insurance, and so on. And by considering all available options, we can help ensure the plan makes sense in everyone's situation, because everyone certainly is different.
Okay, now we're going to talk about Social Security and some different considerations there. Social Security is different based on the year you were born. So if you were born here 1954 or earlier, that's this top line. If your birth year is 1960 or later, that's this bottom line. And then if you were born 1959, that's this line: 58, 57, 56, 55. So things kind of change based on when you were born, but just to kind of cover the 1954 earlier and the 1960 or later, we know that full retirement age, if you were born before 1954, is age 66. Your full retirement age is the age that's, once you hit that, Social Security will not reduce the benefits for you. If you take money before your full retirement age, you will have reduced benefits. Specifically, if you're born 1960 or later, your full retirement age is not age 66, it's age 67. Again, that's just the rules of the system. And then every other year, if you're born in 1958, your full retirement age is 66 and 8 months, and so on and so on. But if we take money before our full retirement age, and you were born 1954 or earlier, those decreased benefits are down about 6.25% average per year. So for instance, with Social Security, you can take it as early as 62. Can't take out Social Security before age 62. That's the earliest you could start. For those that make that decision, you're taking a 25% haircut on Social Security for the rest of your life. On the flip side, you can delay Social Security as late as 70. That's the max age you can delay to. And if you do that, the Social Security benefit will be 132% of what you would have had at your full retirement age. So you get that benefit of waiting. Now, what is the benefit of waiting? Well, it's about 8% growth per year. That's kind of a guaranteed growth rate. If you're born 1960 or later, you can see your full retirement age I mentioned was age 67. If you take the benefits at age 62, you have a 30% reduction in benefits. If you delay to age 70, you can get 124% of your full retirement age. But ultimately, just thinking about waiting, and if we just kind of start at age 62, on average, every year that you wait from the age 62 to your full retirement age, you get about a 7% growth rate per year for waiting. And from your full retirement age to age 70, you get about an 8% growth rate per year for waiting. That's kind of a nice guaranteed rate of return, right? 7 or 8%. I wish I could guarantee that rate of return. But there are risks to Social Security. Risk number one being we don't know when we're going to die, and if you know you're going to die early, you'd want to get the government's money sooner. And then there's political risk, right? Politically, they can change the system at any time, albeit it's very hard to believe that Social Security would change for anyone over the age of 50. If you're under the age 50, the assumption is there'll be some adjustment of benefits just to make the system be able to continue to survive over the next 30, 40 years. Now, if we look at actual numbers for someone claiming at age 70, so delaying the longest they could, that's this top one. In the middle, it's someone claiming at their full retirement age, and the bottom is someone claiming at age 62. So a lot of people talk about claiming at age 62 because they can get the government's money early, and that's what's represented here. Now, the first few years, obviously the person that claims at 62 has got some government money, so they're ahead in the game. But because they took the reduced benefit, eventually those other lines catch up. So specifically, if we look at age 77 for these individuals, the individual that claimed at 62 has accumulated 572,000 of government benefit. The person that delayed for the first 4 years to their full retirement age has accumulated about 577,000. So they're kind of in the lead now. And the person that delayed all the way to age 70 is still in third place here because they've only accumulated $518,000. So even though they're getting $4,748 per month, which is a lot higher than $2,680 or $3,829, they just haven't had long enough time to let that accumulate. If we look at age 81, now the person that started benefits at age 62 is in third place because they only have $763,000 accumulated. Person that claimed at full retirement age has got about 850,000. And that's basically break even here to the person that claimed at 70, which has about 855. So technically they're in first place, but not by much. But every year thereafter, claiming at age 70 got the most money out of the system. And if we go all the way out to age 90, the person that delayed the most would have 1.8 million. The person that claimed at full retirement age would have 1.6 million. And the person that started at 62 would have 1.3 million. So we're talking real dollars here. And statistically, again, we don't know when we're going to die. But if you look at that break-even age here of age 81, there's about a 53% chance that the male would live that long, 66% chance that a female will live that long, or an 84% chance that a married couple, one of you will live that long. And the rules for married couples with Social Security, if one of you dies early, the surviving spouse gets the higher of the two benefits. So you would have that benefit of the other spouse delaying, for instance. So just we have a software we can use to specifically give you your break-even ages and have this discussion with you if anyone on this call is interested. But this is just kind of an interesting example because it quantifies some numbers for you. And if we look at this chart here, this basically says from a longevity standpoint, nobody knows how long they're going to live. And if you knew you were going to die at 77, it's a pretty easy decision to make. You want to claim early. If you knew you're going to live past the age of 81, delaying until age 70 probably makes sense. And then if you live between 77 and 81, using that full retirement age makes sense. The other thing we often hear with people is, well, what if I take Social Security early and I invest the difference? Again, that can work, but because Social Security, if you delay, gets that 7 to 8% guaranteed growth rate, you have to make more than that to make it worthwhile. And this just kind of shows you if you live to age 90, but you take benefits at age 62, you would have to make about a 9% per year rate of return over that time frame. And certainly when you're investing on your own, it's not guaranteed. But yeah, there's different help that we can provide if you want to look at any of these numbers specifically to your situation.
All right, number 10, neglecting estate planning. So after going through all that effort and accumulating assets during your working career, and then subsequently trying to avoid the retirement mistakes we've discussed today, the last piece is making sure the wealth you have at the end of your life is passed on really in the most efficient way possible, which entails having documents drafted so the important people and or charities in your life get what you want them to get and when you want them to get it. So as part of this process, which we're happy to help you go through, while letting the attorney do all the legal document drafting, we can discuss things like, are your kids ready to manage an inheritance? How about your grandkids? And also, what about any charities that you care about? So with all that said, it's been a pleasure presenting to you today. We hope you found our presentation helpful on the top 10 retirement mistakes to avoid. And yeah, thanks for joining us. You're muted, John.
Appreciate everyone's attention. Thanks for joining us today. Again, if you want the recording of this, please let us know. Happy to send that out once we have compliance approval on our side. But please give us a call or email us if you have any thoughts after this presentation that you want to discuss. We're always happy to help. And with that being said, I'm going to stop recording here.